I want to talk about the future of Perl and related topics. So, well, you mentioned on your Twitter and blog a few days ago that O'Reilly switched to a new platform for publishing. So, what exactly is that?
Yes. For mastering Perl, I'm using this new platform that O'Reilly is using for their publishing. I don't quite understand it all yet because I'm just learning it, but they moved away from Subversion and they are using Git, which is nicer because I was using Git anyway, and then I would make my sources and put them into Subversion and then commit again to their thing. So I got rid of that step. But this now, they can more easily take the stuff that I have right in my repository and move it onto the website so people can see what I'm doing right away. And I've been trying to get into this part of the O'Reilly publishing system for quite a while, where people can read the stuff I'm doing in Mastering Perl as I do it. Now I did that with the first edition too. I put it all out in the open and let anyone read it. I didn't care about anything, no DRM or anything like that, but it was just boring HTML, and I didn't really do anything fancy for it. They're doing it now in a way that allows them to sell the different chapters before they're actually delivered. But for Mastering Perl, it's sponsored by OzCon, so you can read them for free anyway. But it's very important, I think, for any sort of advanced book like this, that the public see it before it gets out there. Learning Perl is easy. We all basically know what should go on something like Learning Perl, so I don't need anyone to tell me, oh, do you know about this or do you know about that? It's, it's arrays and scalars and hashes. That's easy. Mastering Perl, someone can come along and say, do you know about like this really esoteric weird case for this particular topic, like serialization. There's a new serializer that can replace storable, and it can do all the same sort of stuff without the security problems. Well, if someone doesn't get to read my chapter on lightweight persistence, they can't say, oh, do you know about this, which I might not have used. And that's a really tough thing to do when I've been using Perl for so long that I'm just used to using all the old stuff, and I don't really care to follow new stuff all the time. I'm not always looking for some cool new way because all the other stuff sort of works, or I thought it worked for me. I'm not aware of the problems. So now all that stuff with Mastering Perl is right in the system, and as soon as I commit, it automatically generates HTML. It looks pretty based on the O'Reilly stuff. People can read it. There's a way for them to send comments back, I think, and I get those, and I can integrate them right into the book, and if I'm on it, I can do it right away and have that stuff available to them the next day. And I'm just really getting into that process now. We can throw some URLs around after this video so people can see that, but so far it looks really exciting.
Do you also expect that people will try to commit to your repository in Git?
I don't know if they get access to the Git stuff. Probably not. But even if they did, I imagine, and I have particular people in mind who would probably try to do pull requests. And that would be a lot of fun. The problem with committing or trying to do patches on a book is that the parts that you're patching might not stick around. So in code it's very easy because I can fix that loop or I can fix that thing, and that code unit is going to stick around in some form. That subroutine is going to stick around because somebody's using it. Or at least, most subroutines are like that. With a book, I might just decide, I don't like that section, it's just not going in. Or I am going to change my focus completely on one of these chapters, and I'm going to put everything in a different order and have all complete new content. And so doing things like spelling fixes, for instance, is a very good example of this. I'm a pretty good speller, but that still means I'm going to miss a bunch of things. But I'm a worse typer, and computers now are starting to guess what word you mean, and it might not be the word I want to put in there. So if I type CPAN on the Mac with its autocorrection, it wants to say clan, because it doesn't know what CPAN is, but it knows what CLAN is. And so I might be typing that, and I might just not be watching the screen, and clan gets in there instead of CPAN. Well, someone sees that, they want to send me a patch for it, that's fine, but by the time they send me the patch, I'm going to change that complete paragraph. And now the patch can't figure out what to do. I do get a lot of feedback, and they say, just send it to me in email, I will figure it out. And even if people send me a patch, I can probably figure it out. But I don't think they're going to have access to the Git stuff. I don't know if there's like a read-only Git thing, because I think I'm pushing internally to O'Reilly's system and not to something like GitHub. I'll have to check on that though, because I haven't even bothered to think about that.
Yeah, see. You also mentioned that you signed the first electronic ebook a few days ago. So, well, actually, how do you feel about that?
Yes. Book signings are interesting, and last week was the first time anyone's asked me to sign a PDF. Now, there's no actual, thing that I guess you could print it out, but that's not the point. And this person asked me, and I said, okay, yeah, I can do that, because the Mac preview application has a way that you can hold your signature that you sign on a regular piece of paper up to the webcam, and it recognizes it and it flips it around and does all this stuff, and then it stores that, and you can just sign your documents right there by dragging an area across a PDF, which is brilliant for getting rid of paper stuff. Banks and whatever were always sending you stuff, and you have to print it out and sign it and then scan it, and then email it back to them in your email to fax gateway, because everyone still has fax machines, it seems. So I took that and said, yeah, I can do that for your book. So I did that bit, and then I had another little text bit where I can sort of type in a note, but then that just looks like me typing. And it's just typed text there. It's not like it tries to make it look like my handwriting. But I guess it worked. I sent him the single page of the book, and I guess most PDF editors can just say knock out that page and replace it with this one, and it works just fine. He was completely happy with it. I put up on one of the blogs. I don't know if you remember which tweet it was or which one I said it. It might have been Mastering Perl. I bet it was Mastering Perl, because I'm the only author on that book. And I'm trying to get the other authors of the other books to do the same thing before I put those pages up. So you can have, on Programming Perl, for instance, Tom's signature and Larry's signature, and if I can ever track down John Orwant, maybe get his signature on there. And then have all those and give those out too. It's great that I can offer that to people who can't meet me for some reason, or don't line up at a conference to get my signature on a book or something like that. It's some way that I can interact with the reader and say, thank you for checking out my book. I'm really glad you did. Here's this extra little thing I can provide you. It would be wonderful, and I would love to embed a video in somebody's PDF page. And I can give a personal greeting and they can watch, and or even do something like take a Yapsy TV video and embed it into an ebook. Here's all my presentations, and I can write some, and I went to the Plus Perl workshop, and I talked to this person, oh yeah, here's my presentation, and then I went on this tour, and ate at this place, or whatever like that. I wish ebooks could do that now. I think they should be able to. It just doesn't ever work out well. It's the readers, it's you get it on the Kindle, and they're like, what, I can't see the video. It's like, oh, go get an iPad, and you develop it in some other format, and that doesn't work on the iPad, because you have to go through Apple stuff. There's so much that we can do still in this digital content that we're not doing that would make it so much better and easier to talk to the readers. And I hope maybe by the time I'm still alive that some of this might happen. But I guess we're going to just stick with the signature title plates for now. I guess that's the best we can do.
But anyway, in general, what do you feel about the future of books? Is it okay for you to sell ebooks instead of paper books?
Ebooks versus the paper books is a really interesting question. I don't know if I'm just the sort that likes the paper books. They have so much more resolution, and you can pile them up on your desk, and you can spread them out, and I can flip through a book on, say, like Ajax or JSON or something without taking up a window on my screen, and I can keep it open while I have other things open. I really like that. But I guess you can do that now because I have this iPad, and I can put my iPad there, and I can not take up space on my development monitors. As far as the sales go, the most interesting thing we've seen is that offering the ebook and the printed book together actually increase sales. So if I say, you can buy, say, Mastering Perl, and this is the experiment that we tried with O'Reilly, you can buy Mastering Perl, the paper copy, and get the ebook for $1 extra or whatever it was. I forget what we did. We actually got a lot more sales that way. So it wasn't that people were just wanting to get the ebook or just wanting to get the paper book. They wanted just to have the book. And if they were at a point where they just wanted to read it in paper, in the bathtub or something, you don't want to keep dropping your iPad in the water, they would love that. If they had the ebook version so they can quickly look it up when they're on the road and they're not carrying around all their books, that worked for them too. I'm hoping the paper books don't disappear, because I don't like ebooks that much. It's hard for me to remember where things are in an ebook. So in a paper book, I know, did I see this on a left-hand page or a right-hand page? Was it towards the middle? Was it near a figure? And I can sort of flip through a book quickly because I can sort of remember what the page looked like. And that's how I find a lot of information. But if you get used to ebooks, maybe you never develop that facility. Maybe that's not something that you ever think about as a skill, because you've just had ebooks all your life, so you don't have this spatial idea of where things are. There's this thing called the memory palace, which is really interesting. It's tapping into this other part of our brain that we never use. There's a part of our brain, and I can't explain it all, I don't know all this stuff, that is just for spatial reasoning. So you can look at something like this room and know that there is this chair here and those plants there, and you sat on that side of the table and I sat on this side of the table and that sort of stuff. So some of these memory tricks, and I don't know if this is a copyrighted name, I have no idea if you have to pay anyone when I say this, but the memory palace says instead of trying to remember things like lists, make it spatial. Put things into some sort of scene and then just remember what the scene looked like. So like if you want to remember all the movie times, for instance, instead of just memorizing this list, make a little theater in your mind and put signs over the doors that said this movie and this movie and this movie is over here, and then have the list of their times somehow near that, and then you'll be able to remember that stuff much better. I think that's how I operate with the paper books, is that the act of physically interacting with it and seeing the different parts of it put it into my head more, because I remember more than just what I read. I don't often remember everything that I read, the actual facts or the content. I remember that author said something about this, and it was somewhere like around here in the book, and I sort of flip through it until I find a sort of page that looks like what I remember it looking like, and that's usually works for me. But who can say? We could want beta tapes all we like, or all we want, and they're still going to disappear, or we could like all sorts of things that are better for us and they're still going to disappear. The thing that really gets me is that the more technology we get, the worse we present content. So imagine movies on film that has really good resolution. And we've gone from that through various other things, and what we got now is streaming video, which is nice, sort of, for getting content, but it pixelates a lot, it pauses, it drops out, and so the experience of actually watching the movie is much worse. And then that stuff gets even worse when we try to watch it on an iPhone or something else. I'm hoping books don't do that. We started with something where we can print in very, very, very tiny dots on a page and do really interesting things and have nice illustrations. We're talking 1,200 dots per inch or even greater on some of these things. And we're now reading things on a device that has 72 dots per inch. Well, that's even more with the Retina displays and the other fancy displays that some of these things are getting, but still, it is not approaching the resolution we have from paper and the way we are able to present information nicely on paper. So I don't know. I'm not a book nut. I'm not the sort that collects books and likes to smell them and likes to touch the leather and have fancy gold leaf on it or anything. But at the same time, I'm not really thrilled with the ebooks, just in the way they're structured and the way they're presented either.
I see. And you tend to update your books when the new Perl comes out. Is it for you just kind of hobby, entertainment, or just hard work?
So every time a new version of Perl comes out, there's some danger that it makes the previous books we've written, Learning Perl, Intermediate Perl, and Programming Perl, makes those books dated. Now, in the computer world, if a book is older than 3 months, or excuse me, 3 years, people think it's complete crap. It's no longer good for anything. Learning Perl holds up really well because it's mostly really Perl 4. We still had all the same scalars, arrays, and hashes, and most of the standard function library. But we put in the other new features in there. The latest one is up to Perl 5.14. And I'm looking at the stuff that is in Perl 5.16 and 5.18, and there's not really much there that's compelling for the user, for learning Perl. Intermediate Perl is a little bit different because some things change in how we handle references. For instance, push and pop and shift and unshift and the other sorts of key arrays and hash operators can now take a reference and figure out, oh yeah, you're really just this hash and I'll do the right thing on you. So we sort of have to shove that sort of thing in there. Same things with features like each that now operate on an array. So that stuff has to get in there as well. But for the most part, people upgrade Perl very, very slowly. So if I write a book that targets Perl 5.14, that means that 6 years later, someone is still going to find that book useful because they just got to Perl 5.14. I did a very informal survey of a bunch of Perl users. Most people don't ever upgrade. They just take whatever is on their system and they stick with that. And you know, the Debian or Ubuntu or whatever the things are might provide updated packages, but people just don't update their stuff from the current packages. So they're on 5.10. They're going to be on that way till they find some reason to switch to something else. Lots of my customers are still on 5.8, and it works for them. I don't like it necessarily, but that's just the way it is. So I think most of the world, most of the people who buy books don't care about the particular Perl version. They don't look at the thing on the cover and say, oh, this is up to date and this is the one I should get. When I look at my royalty statements, people are still buying the 3rd edition of programming, or the 3rd edition of Learning Perl, the 4th edition of Learning Perl, and the 5th edition of Learning Perl. I don't know where they're buying them from. I don't know how these books are still there, but they're out there. I get like $2 a quarter out of it or something like that. But they just buy whatever the latest edition is and don't care so much. Programming Perl was a completely different thing. This book was last published in 2000, I think. I think it was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. It took about 2 years to rewrite the latest version, the 4th edition. Tom did a valiant job in updating all that and redoing everything for Unicode. My name's on the book, but I did the very boring, easy bits at the end. Tom did the first big chunk of the book that is hard. So I did the easy bit, Tom did the really hard part. And of course, Larry was supervising the whole thing, saying, I like it like this, and I like it like that. That book, it would be nice to do it for every major version, but come on, it's how many pages are in that book? Like 1,600 or something like that. We're not going to update that book every year for every major version of Perl. It's just, we would constantly be working on this book that isn't not going to make anyone rich, and that people are sort of ignoring anyway. I would hope that every Perl person would buy Programming Perl just to have it on their shelves, but honestly, if I wasn't one of the authors, I don't think I'd buy it. You know, I know Perl, I can read the docs, I can look online, I can ask questions. I don't need this huge book unless I, you know, have to open a door and keep it open. You know, put a doorstop down there or drop it on someone's foot to break their toes or something. I sort of get the reality that it is very tough to sell something when a lot of the work from the same people go into the core documentation. But it's a wonderful book. The stuff that Tom did is just amazing. And it's actually wonderful that that same person will take that same stuff he did and put it for free into Perl. So maybe people will feel sad for us and go out and buy their book from O'Reilly or through their user group, or like you can do here at the Polish Perl Workshop. Wendy and Liz bring a bunch of books and they sell them for half price and they make no profit off of it. Mastering Perl hasn't been updated in a long time, but that is really version agnostic. It's more about thinking about what you can do in Perl rather than the particular versions. Effective Perl programming, I think, is the same way, which is a wonderful book that somehow doesn't get the attention it deserves. When Joseph Hall published that book originally, I think it was the best book ever written on Perl. And if I had to say today, list all the books, I still think that would be one of the top 3 books ever written on Perl on anything. My books don't even rate compared to Joseph's original book. I am so happy I got to work on the 2nd edition. And I think the 2nd edition is fantastic. But as as a second edition, it is not like the seminal work that Joseph did. I mean, this was just a brilliant book when it was published. I think that is a book that a lot of people would really enjoy, despite any sort of version updates. You can read 4 pages and that's it. You don't have to go through a whole chapter. It doesn't build on the things that came before. And that book's really easy to update for version stuff because you only have to touch the very small bits where you talk about that particular task. Another book I think is in the works for updating is the Perl Cookbook. And that would be really interesting to see all those new features that have come in since like 5.10 applied to these particular problems. I don't have any part of that though. I got enough books to focus on now. I'm trying to get Mastering Perl done this summer and then look at it is time to start the cycle again, learning Perl up to 5.18 or 5.20 by the time I get there, I guess. And then, you know, intermediate Perl coming in with all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so the version stuff hasn't mattered so much for that.
In 5.10 that appeared Smart Match Operator. Actually, what do you think about this operator, and should it stay as it is now in Perl, or should it be neglected completely or modified in some way? So,
yeah. The Smart Match Operator that showed up in 5.10 is this really interesting case. And I hope that we've sort of learned our lesson in the Perl community that these experimental features need to be marked experimental, and that's actually what they're doing in 5.18 and beyond. But if we're going to put an experimental feature in there, we need to test the heck out of it and try it with all sorts of different use cases, because that's not what happened with the Smart Match Operator. And I wanted to use a Smart Match Operator the other day, and I was thinking, oh geez, this might be removed in Perl pretty soon, so I guess I better just write it out and have this complicated thing. And I wanted to do the simple thing. I just wanted to match this regex against a bunch of hash keys, and the Smart Match will do that. You can regex on one side, hash on the other, and it will do this. But then I have to remember, okay, what Perl am I using? As long as it's not 5.10.0, I know I can do it this way. If it's 5.10.0, I can do it this other way. There's been a lot of people saying, it should do this, it should do this. My thing has always been, does it make life easier for Perl programmers? Does it follow the thing that says, the easy things, the common things should be easy, and the hard things should at least be possible. The stuff that we would get rid of in Smart Match would make the common things not be useful through Smart Match. It would make the hard things that we never really do anyway possible, but not in any sort of easier way. I think at this point, personally, I would love to have one that works, but I don't think we're going to get there because I don't think we have a consensus on what it should do. And so I think we're just going to have to do without. Which is actually means I have to go back and update the Learning Perl to remove the chapter on smart matching. We got it in there for 5.10.1, and I think it basically still works as a chapter, but now we can't be teaching people that if it's going to disappear next year in 5.20.
But this chapter 15 also includes given and when. You also would like to remove it.
Yes, yes. I'm surprised you actually know the actual chapter for it too. Yeah, so the chapter 15 in Learning Perl, at least the 6th edition, I don't know if we'll change chapters later, has the smart match and then given and when. Now given was a problematic feature before because it would do fancy things with lexical $_. And that caused a lot of problems if you wanted to use another $_ like inside a map or a grep or something inside the given. But I read the release notes for Perl 5.18 and I think they fixed that. Because I think now given got rid of that magic with $_ and is now doing it the same way that for does, or for each does. So there is a lot of stuff to salvage in that chapter if we get rid of the smart match, because we still want to do the give and win. But the give and win without the smart matching isn't that much more powerful than just having a loop that you have some if statements in there. It's not, the code's not that much worse. The syntax sugar is nice for the win, and should I break or should I continue? But without the smart matching, it just sort of seems like a feature that's there looking for a problem.
We're now in the situation where Perl 5 is developing, but it's outdated in when you approach somebody who's not familiar with Perl, they just say, well, Perl 5.8 was released 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and it's still 5 today, so they don't think that is the problem. Well, and how actually can we handle it? Should we go to Perl 7, skipping 6? Or should we develop Perl 6 and release it first? Well, actually, the thing is not just to change the major version. The thing is to persuade people outside Perl community that Perl is not dead.
Yeah, the naming of the thing is really curious. So we have Perl 5, and everyone sort of knows what Perl 5 is. And then we came along and we thought there was going to be this thing called Perl 6, which would take everyone that was working on Perl 5 and go over to Perl 6. Because one of the main goals of Perl 6 was we can take most of the Perl 5 programs that exist and just run them on whatever we're going to come up with. That didn't happen. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. But we kept calling it Perl 6, and it was a long time before they started calling it Rakudo and all that. But if you listen to anyone working on Rakudo or any of these things talk about it, and they show you an example, what they do is they type out this command that says Perl 6. Mostly because they're using all sorts of different things. I don't think any name is going to fix this. I think it is just going to confuse people a lot more. If we say Perl 7, they're going to say, well, Perl 6 is dead. And this is not Perl 5, this is somehow Perl 6 next version. Other things, given it names like Pumpkin Perl or some of the other things they thought about, I think it's just going to lead to the same sort of balkanization that lots of other projects have, where they don't know which one they should use. There's all these things out here. Which one is it? Is it Perl 5? Is it Perl 5i? Is it Perl 6? Perl 7? No one's going to understand this unless they really pay attention, and that's the problem. These things only work if people pay attention, but the thing is most people aren't paying attention. Because if they were paying attention, they would have no confusion between Perl 5 and Perl 6, because they would know what's happened with that. People like to say it's a marketing problem, but it's not at all a marketing problem. It is an advertising problem. Marketing is figuring out what your users want and how you can provide that to them. Advertising is saying, this is what I'm going to tell you. I don't care what you think. It is an issue because we keep making it an issue. I've never really heard the complaint in the wild. I think this is people guessing why people don't do things. We had a great talk here at the Polish Perl workshop about the business case for Perl, and the thing was, no one cares about most of the things that we think they care about. They just want to use something that gets their job done. For instance, people use WordPress because it is WordPress and it does the job, not because, oh, I want to use PHP. I use WordPress and I have no idea which version of PHP I'm using, and I don't care. If there was something that people wanted to use in Perl 5, that was written in Perl 5, they would use that thing and they would not care which version of Perl it came from. If it was 5i, pumpkin, strawberry, whatever. They just want to use stuff. For programmers, it's a little bit different. So they want to target a particular thing, and hopefully, if you're a programmer, you're paying attention to what particular thing you're using. But at the same time, you have to realize that when I ship this thing for other people to use, I want them to be able to use it with the least amount of hassle possible. And so I'm stuck with whatever comes with Debian or whatever comes with my operating system. I don't want to make them go through this long thing where they have to compile and do all this and all that sort of thing. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers for that. I think that problem has already been solved, and the more we talk about it, the more confusing we make it for everyone else. If we just stop talking about it, which is the absolute last thing that's ever going to happen in a volunteer open source community, no one would care. But the more we talk about things, the bigger a problem it seems. So I don't know. I don't have any answers. So I have completely stayed out of that debate whatsoever.
CPAN was one of the killer features of Perl. Is it not the case? Because first of all, we have lots of outdated modules, crap modules, and we also have GitHub, which is competing with CPAN.
Yeah, so CPAN used to be the thing that we throw around as Perl's killer feature. If it's been done somewhere before, it's probably on CPAN. And we had an easy way to install it, but that's got more complicated as people have become much more picky in their build systems. But I want to do this, and I want to have all these sort of tests, and I want to use all these modules that will never get installed before you install this thing. we've kind of gone a little bit overboard there. We have also gone a little bit overboard on dependencies. Some things that made an initial contract with users that saying we're going to be small and light and core only, you know, different developers come in and different things happen, and all of a sudden they're pulling in half a CPAN. There was a thing I downloaded today and tried to install. It took about an hour. And I was like, I could have solved this problem on my own in core Perl in the time it took you just to install the thing that would let me do the thing I'm doing. I forget what it was. It was something stupid. It was a one-shot thing. We have to get our act together on that. I would love to recommend a bunch of different things on CPAN to people, but I don't want to put them through the installation hassle. Maybe if they had a Debian package, it would be easy because they can just put it in one place, but then they can't have their own Perl because it messes up their system Perl. Having modules in different places is an interesting idea. Instead of just having it on CPAN, if we could tell our CPAN installers, like CPAN minus can, that you can go to GitHub, or you can go to here, or you can go to my private repo here, that would be really interesting. But I don't know how much that's actually going to help people. Pulling it from GitHub is interesting, but then you have to be ready for things to break. I like CPAN because I can say this is a definite release that I think I am done with and is at a certain point. Now, we can do GitHub tags and all that sort of stuff. We can do that, but then things start to get sort of complicated. It's very easy for me to remember CPAN version 1.23 or whatever it is. It's much harder for me to keep track of, okay, it's that GitHub account, but wait, no, it was forked by this guy, and I want to use that guy's version, and then keep switching back as, okay, that one got merged back in, and I want to stay on the canonical branch. And it's sort of nice to have that flexibility, but I think the key for CPAN was that it was all in one place. We've seen other languages sort of try to do that just anywhere on the web. And what you end up with is people not having the idea of going to CPAN or some central repository and saying, this is where I can get everything. I don't have to remember all this stuff. I don't have to remember that this guy dropped out of that project, so I can no longer look at his GitHub repository and have to go look in this other GitHub repository. I just ask for the module I want, and the CPAN installers that are looking at CPAN figure out who wrote it, when it was released, which one's the latest, and that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I could be completely wrong on that. We'll have to see how that plays out. I know I don't want to spend the time to think that hard about it. So, but maybe other people do. I don't know. Right. GitHub is amazing in that it is amazingly simple to collaborate. I can go to a GitHub project, fork it, look at a file, hit the edit button right in the browser, do my change, save it, and send the pull request with never pulling down the stuff. And it has probably given me 10 times more pull request or patches and collaborations than before, when people would have to bring down my stuff, change it, make a patch file, send it to me in email, then bug me to put it in there. GitHub, I go there, I see the pull request, it looks like it works, bam, it's done. I move on in life. I don't have to remember my email, I don't have to remember anything. But I also see the value of doing that, and at some point having someone who says, yes, this is now ready for regular people, let's push it up to CPAN. I like to have someone in charge of projects who can say, look, we have to test it, we have to make sure it's of certain quality, the documentation portion is done and all that, and then have that thing that says, yes, this is the one. GitHub is great for a lot of people who love to be on the bleeding edge, but also I find that those people have the time and the inclination to chase down really minor problems, or to read code to find out what it does instead of reading documentation, or something like that. So it would be interesting if we could do CPAN completely in GitHub by just having the packages file just point to things that are already in GitHub, and just pull directly from there, and not have the actual repository anywhere, or have the pause interface. If someone wants to do that, I would love to try that out. That would actually be pretty interesting. We just have to figure out like who the authority is. But then we have this Perl 6 idea of, you can say, I want to use this module from this author, this version range, from this source. So if we could do that with GitHub in Perl 5, that might be a big win. I just want someone else to do all the work.
But anyway, do you think that the current Perl 5, would it be 18 or 20? Is it a good language to start with? Like,
is Perl a good language to start with? This is something I go back and forth on.
not just Perl,
but
current Perl.
The current Perl. You mean because it's newer, or because of the particular features?
It has some new features since 5.10, which are really nice.
I think the current versions of Perl are as fine to start with as anything, say, back to 5.6, because it also depends on what sort of programmer you are and what your experience is with other languages. There are some people who have just a wealth of experiences with all sorts of other languages, so they can quickly pick up a new language and they know what they want to do. They can quickly translate to something. If you are just starting a new programmer, I don't think it's going to make a difference, because you are going to be learning the very basics of Perl. And as you do that, it doesn't matter if it's 5.8 or 5.10 or 5.20, because those basically scalars, arrays, and hashes are basically the same thing. And you're probably not going to get up to those advanced features. There's some slight syntactic things. Maybe it's slightly better, but I don't think it's going to matter that much. Yeah.
Can Perl offer something really new?
Well, the big feature that exists now that Perl can be the killer in is Unicode support. I think they have added as an experimental feature in 5.18, which I have not tried yet, character class set math, which means that you can have a character class and you can say, I want to have all of this range of Unicode characters in there, but minus these few other ones. Now you can do that now. You can set up your own Unicode properties and you can put whatever characters you like in there. But this particular feature, and I think Carl Williamson has done a fantastic job getting this stuff into Perl, is the last thing that Perl needed at the lowest level of Unicode support that's specified by the Unicode Consortium to be compliant at that particular level. And I think Perl might be the only language that complies at those particular levels in all of the parts. The problem is a lot of people haven't caught on to Unicode yet. So they're still using Latin 1 or whatever they're doing. US people still think in ASCII, so they don't care so much about the Unicode. But now that I'm familiar with it, and Tom Christensen in writing Programming Perl is beating it into my head, I'm doing a lot more of that in my own programs, and I come to Poland, for instance, for the Polish Perl workshop, and I say, oh, I now have to type their names correctly. I can't just anglicize it, because I know how to type it now, and I know that I can do it correctly in Perl. I hope people would catch on to that sort of thing. We should have been doing this all along. We should have always been saying, I am providing this output in this encoding, and I am reading this input in this encoding. We always got away with it because if you took a national region of the world, they all agreed that we're just going to use this one thing. US was ASCII. Lots of Europe was Latin 1. In other parts, Russia was, what was Russia?
There were like 5 different.
Okay, there were 5 different ones. Okay, so maybe in Russia you were already doing it. We're doing the things now in Unicode that we should have been doing before anyway, just to be good programmers. So that can be a real strength. When it comes to processing lots of things from lots of different sources, Perl can handle that. The thing that I would love to see, and this is a really interesting bit, at the first Perl 6 meeting, when they gathered everyone in a room together, and we started thinking about, we have to have this new thing because Perl 5 is dying. Now they've been saying Perl 5 is dying ever since I've been using Perl, and I'm still supporting myself on it, so I don't know about dying. So what would this new thing be? And, I threw out my thing, and other people said their things, and Larry was sort of, I remember he was sitting over on the other side of the table from me on the corner, and he didn't say anything for a long time, and then he said, distributed computing. That was the thing that he wanted as the first thing he contributed to the group for Perl 6. None of these other fancy features and syntax or whatever. He wanted a way to say, I have this problem that I can break up into various bits, and I just want the language to figure that out. So for instance, Perl 6 has this idea of the cross operator, where you can have a bunch of stuff on this side of the operator and a bunch of stuff on this side of the operator, and you put a cross in there. And I forget the exact syntax for it, but you can say I want to add every element here to the corresponding element over here. So I would say add the first thing here with the first thing there, the second thing here, the second thing there, and so on. Well, with that, you can parallelize that. You can say, if this is a really expensive operation, hey, you CPU over there, go do this one. You over there, go do this one. Oh, this is really hard. I'll give this to a completely separate system. And after I'm done, I'll just collect all the answers and I'll put them in here, and then I'll give you back the result. And you won't have to know how that happened at all. You just know that it worked. I would love to have that. That would be really, really cool. There are a lot of things I do where it just takes time. I have my large machine at home that has a lot of processors and a lot of cores and all that sort of stuff, and it can chew away at that. But I have to make it do that. I have to say, this is how I want you to do it. I want you to fork this many processes. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. If we could do that, that would be a big win for Perl. And I think if we could learn from things like Erlang or Go or some of these other languages that are trying to add that sort of stuff in, we could catch up there. There's not very much else I want from Perl, though. I am just not a very sophisticated programmer. I like a lot of the things that people proposed. I love a lot of the stuff for list creation and list slicing, but sort of beyond that, it's sort of be nice to have, but I mean, it'd sort of be wasted on me, I think, sort of like, you know, a Lamborghini. Like, I could sit in it, but I probably couldn't drive one. It's a nice car, I guess, but what am I going to do with it? I mean, sit there at stoplights? It would probably do the same thing with any other fancy features. And this is sort of the same thing I said in an interview when I was first involved with the Perl 6 project in 2000. It's like, I'm interested where this is going, but Perl 5 is still getting the job done. And I think it's still going to be like that. It would be very nice. I think the thing that Perl 5 could really work on that could be even a bigger win, I know this isn't the sort of question you're asking, is solve that error message that says can't locate this file in, and then it dumps out @inc on us. I think people would be much more willing to use Perl 5, honestly, if that error message was, I couldn't find this module. If you need to install it, do this, or whatever the thing is. If you look at Stack Overflow, for instance, I think that is the #1 question people ask. What does this error message mean? Can't locate, and it gives us this path. It has no relationship to anything that's actually in our source code. I mean, you have to take off some stuff and make some things double colons and take off the .pm. And people just see this big chunk of text and they have no idea what that is. That's not going to help anyone get the job done, but I think it will make more people want to use Perl. But no, beyond that, Perl 5 is, I still get quite a bit done. So I don't know if I need anything else. And that's the really interesting bit. Is people ask me that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know. I sort of got everything I want, or enough that I can get the job done without feeling too bad about it.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing connected with Perl is community, which kind of different from other languages. And you established PM groups a long time ago. Do you see that there should be some change in how it is organized now?
Okay, so this is an interesting thing. So I, along with Dave Adler and Adam Turoff, a long, long time ago, and I forget which year it was like 97 or 98, invented the New York Perl Motors. And we did it with the sole idea of returning from it's called the Perl conferencing because it was only Perl. Returning from that, going back to New York, and just hanging out with each other. I had just moved to New York, and I wanted to meet more people there, and I had no idea about getting anything out of it other than just hanging out with people. If I'm working in Perl and they're working with Perl, we have some sort of common topic, we can hang out, we can talk about movies or Doctor Who or whatever it is. And if I needed something, I then knew a bunch of people who knew me, and I could say, oh, I need a job, or hey, do you know how to solve this problem, or whatever it is. Some of that now you can do all online. If you have to ask a question, you don't have to go to Usenet and figure out how do I download a reader and all that sort of stuff. You can go to Stack Overflow. So maybe you don't need that portion of it. But I still think the social aspect of it is the most important thing. But at the same time, I realize that different groups have different needs, and they want to do things in a slightly different way. So for instance, Tim Mayer in Seattle, when he created Spug, wanted to make it an educational collective. I think that's the term that he used, where he said we want to teach each other Perl, and he designed it that way, so there were presentations and learning, and that's fine, and that worked for them. Jim Keenan in New York did sort of the same thing with Perl Seminar New York. And until about a year ago, there were actually 3 New York Perl user groups. There was NYPM, the original, Perl Seminar New York, and then there was a meetup. And the meetup had never heard of NYPM, which was curious. But then they got together, and now it's all one thing. Well, not really one thing, because it's not a thing. It's just a group of people who decide, I'm going to be at this pub tonight, or I'm going to go to this thing tonight. And they just use all the resources available to them to pass all the information around. I enjoy the fact that I can go to a conference almost anywhere in the world and meet other Perl people. This came out of people starting user groups in their own area. And so the Polish Perl workshop where we are now is put on by Warsaw.pm. If I go to London, I can go out drinking with London.pm. If I go to Amsterdam, I often go through Amsterdam. It is not uncommon to show up at some pub. And that happens because I just know all these people. I don't necessarily need to see a presentation or do a tech talk or do anything formal. It's just to say, hey, we all know each other. Let's get together and do this. And I think that was the real important thing about that whole thing, is that we just got people to know each other. So you were living in Russia the first time we talked, and I think you're in Amsterdam now, but I don't think I would have ever met you if we didn't have the Perl Mongers groups, and Kevin Linzo had decided to do yet another Perl conference, and then we got a whole bunch of other Perl Monger groups, and then they all tried to do their conferences, and then eventually you ran 23 Perl conferences. I don't know. You have some high. You're in the
33, I think.
33. So you're above Jose now. And that is the crazy thing, that if you're in this core Perl community, you know someone in every time zone probably. Well, maybe not like some of the Eastern Russian time zones. I don't think I know anyone there. But you did do Vladivostok Perl conference. I don't know if that's in the same time zone. But definitely in the US and most of Europe, yeah, I think, except for maybe Eastern Russia, I think I know a Perl person in every time zone. Like I could talk to, and if I showed up in their town, they'd invite me to dinner. In the same way, if they showed up in my town, I would take them out. And just that connection makes all sorts of other things possible. I think Perl must have the most number of events of any language thing. A lot of languages have one big corporate event every year, maybe some smaller. But there is a Perl thing going on somewhere almost every week. I think I mapped it out once. I haven't done it for the last couple of years, but I think like when I did it in 2010 or something, there was a Perl event somewhere in the world every week. And this stuff gets blogged, and it gets videoed, and it gets uploaded. And we know who the people look like who are making the stuff that we're using. Like, we know what their faces are. I don't know if the other communities can say that sort of thing. They know maybe the celebrities, but they don't know what some of these other people will look like. And I know what beer they drink. I know, what their families are like, and all sorts of stuff. And that just makes it so much easier to work with them. So I don't know. I don't want to say anyone has to change. I have tried to stay out of it. I know I was there at the beginning, and I was very fortunate to be there at the beginning. I didn't do anything special. I was just happened to be there first. If it wasn't me, someone else would have done it eventually. I hope. So I can just say what I like. I just like the social aspect of it. And then realizing that the social bit is going to benefit everyone else somehow later in ways I don't understand. I am not particularly attracted to the bit where I go and I sit in a room and I listen to people talk about Perl, and then when that person is done, everyone goes home. Often because I already pay attention to the Perl community quite a bit, so if I haven't heard their talk before, I probably know most of the stuff that's already in it. And but also I know that people got to practice their talks somewhere too. It's just, I think people need to find a balance. Don't be all one way and don't necessarily be all another way. If you focus on the tech stuff too much, I think you're going to lose some newbies. If you are just social, you're probably going to lose some of the really good tech people. Somewhere in the middle, you'll be able to attract some newbies because they can just hang out. They don't have to prove their Perl skills. They don't have to compete to see who knows the most Perl. And that can draw them into the tech side. But with like I say, I don't want to tell people what to do, because I find it's much easier and much more natural that the good things will happen if I just let people do the things on their own. And that was actually really one of our goals from the start of Perl Motors, especially when Adam Turoff and I were organizing the first like 100 groups or something at the next year after NYPM. Because we went to the Perl conference, we laid out a bunch of sheets and say, put where you're from at the top and put your name on that list, and we'll hand out these lists to people, and you guys go off and start your groups. We didn't tell them to do anything in particular. There was no guide, there was no book, just here's a bunch of people that are in your same city, go for it. And they did what was appropriate for them. And I think we got a lot good out of it, and if we try to optimize it, we might ruin it.